Ah. A tired-looking woman entered a grocery store and asked the owner for enough food to make a Christmas dinner for her children. When he inquired how much she could afford, she answered, "My husband was killed in an accident. Truthfully, I have nothing to offer except for a little prayer." Although the man was unmoved at first, he thought of a clever response to the woman's simple request. He said to her sarcastically, "Write your prayer on a piece of paper and you can have its weight in groceries." To his surprise, she plucked out a folded note and out of her pocket and handed it to him, saying, "I already did that during the night while I was watching over my sick child." Without even reading it, he put it on one side of his old-fashioned scale. "Well, let's see how much food this is worth," he muttered. To his dismay, nothing happened to the scale when he placed a loaf of bread on the other side of the scale. It didn't tip down. He became even more upset when he added to the bread a number of other items of food, and still it did not tip down. Finally, he blurted out, "Well, that's all it will hold anyway. Here's a bag, and you'll have to put these things in yourself. I'm busy." With a tearful thank you from her, the woman happily went on her way. The grocer later discovered that the scale somehow was broken and froze in the up position. For a long time he wondered if this had been nothing more than just a lucky coincidence for this woman. Had she just happened to come in just after he had broken somehow? Had she just luckily wrote the note ahead of time so that it was ready when he said he would take her prayer note and weigh it and give her as much in groceries? Every time he looked at the note she wrote during the night before coming in, he was amazed because she had written on it, "Please, dear Lord, give us this day our daily bread." He thought to himself, "How did she know I would put a loaf of bread on the scale first?" Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Well, we know God works in mysterious ways, right?
Sure does.
We never know how He's going to answer a prayer. And as we have seen in our study of the book of Ruth, nothing happens by accident or coincidence. In chapter 1, we learned that there was a famine in the land. A man by the name of Elimelech moved his family away from Moab and away from God. His intention was not to stay away from the land and God for that long or very long, but he ended up staying longer than he intended to. We are told in the story that Elimelech and his 2 sons die while in the land of Moab, and Naomi and Ruth and Orpah are left without a way to provide for themselves. Eventually Naomi hears that God had come to the aid of his people and again was providing food for them. So she, along with Ruth and Orpah, set out to return to Bethlehem, where God is once again blessing or coming to the aid of his people. Well, what is interesting to me is that none of these events that take place by accident. Right? First of all, I believe the famine was no accident. I believe God orchestrated the famine. The reason why God orchestrated the famine was because of the people's disobedience to His will or to His law or to His commandments. So again, I don't think the famine was an accident. Hearing about God's provision, we also hear somehow Naomi had heard about God aiding His people again in Bethlehem. We are not told how she heard about it. But again, I believe this was no accident, that she actually heard the call or heard that God was blessing His people again. And then, in chapter 2, we read that Naomi just happened to have a relative on her husband's side from the clan of Elimelech, a man of standing whose name was Boaz. We learned that Boaz was related to Naomi through marriage. He is a man of great resources. He is well off, and he is a man that has great position or great reputation in the society. It just so happens that Naomi is related to Boaz, a person that is wealthy and one that is able to provide for her needs. Right? Just so happens. Coincidence? I don't think so. It's funny how things work out sometimes. In each case, we see the hand of God working behind the scenes here, don't we? Then we read in chapter 2 and verse 2 that Ruth asked Naomi to let me go to the fields and pick up the leftover grain behind anyone in whose eyes I find favor. Her intention for going out into the field was to find grace or favor from anyone that would give it to her. Right? She went out expecting to find grace or find favor in the eyes of someone that could provide for herself and Naomi as well. What is grace? Grace is bestowed as a favor bestowed on someone who does not deserve it and can't earn it. As a poor widow woman and an alien in the land, she was at the mercy of others to provide the grace that she needs to survive. Remember, Ruth is at the lowest rung of the social ladder. She's an outcast. She's an alien in a foreign land to her. But we also read in verse 2 or verse 3, chapter 2, so she went out and began to glean in the fields behind the harvesters. As it turned out, just so happened, she found herself working in a field belonging to Boaz, who was from the clan of Elimelech. Again, accident? Just so happened? Again, we see the hand of God working in the life of Ruth. Again, is this a coincidence that she ends up where she ends up? I don't think so.